Hello, and welcome to this educational platform of Ghatana Chakra Book video. Our aim is to deliver knowledge to you in a simple, clear, and accessible manner. Let us begin this journey of learning and success.
All right, let's talk about the workforce. Ever really stop and wonder who in this country is actually working and where they're doing it? Well, we're about to get the clearest picture we've ever had, thanks to a huge new survey that looks at rural and urban areas at the exact same time. Let's dive right in.
I mean, it sounds like such a simple question, right? But getting a real, solid answer is incredibly complicated. Just think about it. How do you actually go about counting millions and millions of people across so many different parts of the country? It's a massive undertaking.
Well, for the first time, we've got a new labor force survey. This one's for April to June 2025. That gives us that simultaneous look at both rural and urban life. This is the tool that's going to help us answer that big question, and it's so powerful because it finally lets us see the whole country at once.
Okay, so before we can really get into the story the numbers are telling us, we all need to be speaking the same language. There are three key terms that pretty much unlock everything. Let's quickly break them down.
First up is the LFPR. The easiest way to think about it is this. Out of everyone who could be working, this is the percentage that's actually in the game. They either have a job or they're actively out there trying to find one. Everyone else, students, retirees, homemakers who aren't looking for paid work, they're outside of this specific group. Next up, the WPR. This one's a lot more straightforward, actually. It's simply the percentage of the entire population that currently has a job. That's it. It's a direct measure of who's employed.
And finally, we've got the unemployment rate, the UR. And this is the one that most people get wrong. It doesn't measure joblessness across the whole population. No, it only looks inside that first group, the labor force, and tells us what percentage of them are trying but failing to find a job. That distinction is absolutely critical.
All right, now that we know the lingo, let's look at the big picture. These national numbers are going to be our benchmark, our starting point, as we dig deeper into all the details.
So, what's the national scene look like? Well, the labor force participation rate, that LFPR, is 55%. That means just over half of the country's potential workforce is actually in the game, either working or looking. The other 45% are on the sidelines. So remember that number, 55%.
Okay? And out of the whole population, how many are actually employed? That's our WPR, and it's 52%. See how it's pretty close to the participation rate? That tells you that most people who are actually in the labor force do, in fact, have a job.
And that little gap between those last two numbers, that gives us our national unemployment rate, 5.4%. So to be super clear, that means for every 100 people who are actively trying to work, a little over 5 of them can't find a job right now. This is our baseline.
Okay, but here's the thing. A national average can sometimes be a bit of a mirage, right? It often hides what's really going on underneath, and this is where it gets fascinating when we split the country into rural versus urban.
And bam! Right away, we see a huge difference. In rural areas, a much higher percentage of people are in the labor force, over 57%. In the cities, it's just a bit over 50%. So the first piece of our puzzle is that people in the countryside are, as a whole, more economically active.
And that trend just keeps going when we look at who actually has a job. Again, rural areas are in the lead, with over 54% of the population employed. In urban areas, that number drops down to just 47%. So more people are working in the countryside. But hold on a second.
Because here's the twist. Even though fewer people are participating in the urban workforce, the unemployment rate in cities is actually higher. It's almost 7%. Meanwhile, in rural areas, it's below 5%. So just think about that for a second. In the city, you have fewer people in the job market, but a higher percentage of them can't find work. What is going on here?
So we've seen the where, but to figure this out, we need to ask about the who and the how. We've got to look at the differences in gender participation and the very nature of work itself in these two very different economies.
A huge part of the story really comes down to gender. Just look at this difference for women. In rural areas, more than a third of women are employed, but in the cities, that number drops to less than a quarter. That is a massive gap. It really makes you wonder why so many fewer women are working in urban areas.
The type of work people do is also completely different. In the countryside, it is all about self-employment, and this is especially true for women. A staggering 71.6% of working women in rural areas are their own boss.
Now let's flip over to the city.
It's the exact opposite. Forget self-employment. Here, it's all about getting that steady paycheck. Over half of working women in cities are in regular salaried jobs. So we're not just talking about a different economy, it's a completely different way of life and work.
Okay, we have looked at a ton of data. We've sliced it up by rural and urban, by men and women, by different types of work. So let's just pull it all together and figure out what the big takeaways really are.
So when you zoom out, what's the big picture? It's clear we have two separate economies. There's a rural one where more people are working, they're often working for themselves, and there's lower official unemployment. And then you have an urban one, built on salaried jobs, where fewer people are in the workforce, especially women. And yet it's actually harder for those who are looking to find a job.
This survey gives us the most detailed, high-resolution picture we have ever had of our country's workforce. It shows us exactly where we stand right now. But the real question it leaves us with is this. Now that we can see these divides and these differences so clearly, what story do we want this data to tell 5 or 10 years from now?